Good morning, friends. Good morning.
Good morning.
Thank you for coming today. My name is the Reverend David Lewicki. I'm the co-pastor of the North Decatur Presbyterian Church in Decatur, Georgia. I am pleased to be able to stand here today and introduce the folks who are standing behind me. We are gathered today to make several statements as faith leaders in this community, and we stand here today to oppose what has come to be called the Religious Freedom Restoration Bill. There is a letter that has been circulating among clergy in Atlanta and in the state of Georgia. There are now over 60 faith leaders who have signed on to this letter, and we stand together in opposition of this bill. I want to invite you now to listen to several of faith leaders in our community who will articulate their reasons for opposing this bill. The first person I'd like to introduce is to my right, the Rabbi Peter Berg, who serves as the senior rabbi at the temple here in Atlanta.
Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm honored to be here with distinguished guests, with clergy, colleagues, with Senator Orrock. This is an important day. I'm Rabbi Peter Berg, the senior rabbi of the temple here in Atlanta. It is Atlanta's oldest and Georgia's largest Jewish congregation. Let me begin by stating unequivocally that I am a staunch supporter of religious freedom. My grandparents came to America to escape religious persecution from Germany and from Russia with the expectation that their faiths, their rights, and their lives would be protected here in America. I'm opposed to House Bill 29 precisely because religious freedom is, for me as a rabbi, the most important freedom guaranteed by our Constitution. And religious freedom is already protected by the Constitution of the United States of America and the Constitution in the state of Georgia. And the protections have stood the test of time. I believe, and I think all of us believe, that if enacted, this bill would give the right to harm others, and not only to do so, but to do so in the name of religion. I'm here today because I believe this bill is a divisive measure, and divisiveness is not what Georgia needs right now. One of the central tenets of Torah, my sacred text, is to treat others fairly, to treat our neighbors the way that we ourselves would want to be treated. But this bill could have a broad range of harmful consequences, from discrimination against gays and lesbians in Georgia to individuals claiming religious rights to ignore the laws that we already have on the books. If enacted, one could actually claim exemption from a child labor law investigation. One could actually deny counseling to an individual who is gay or lesbian. That is not religious freedom. It is plain and simple discrimination. I also want to be clear that I'm a strong supporter of the federal RFRA laws, and I even helped to get that legislation passed in 1993 when I was a rabbi in Texas. This is a huge priority then for the Jewish community, and I'm proud of the work that we did on federal RFRA. But Georgia House Bill 29 is no federal RFRA. And I want to caution our elected leaders against tinkering with the timeless concept of religious freedom, especially when there is no evidence, absolutely no evidence, that our religious rights are currently being compromised. Religious leaders of all denominations fear that House Bill 29 might have unintended consequences that tip the careful balance we have achieved between secular laws and between religious practices. We must ensure that Americans and Georgians are not harmed, intentionally or otherwise, in the rush to pass a law to enact new protections for religious beliefs. And this law was put together very quickly and was introduced before the session even started. I understand that from time to time, differences in religious beliefs will arise in public policy, and that these need to be reviewed by the courts. But those issues should be guided by the protections that are guaranteed by our Constitution. And in the few instances when it is necessary to clarify how those differences might be resolved, we must err on the side of protecting the rights for all, rather than accommodating the fears of the few. Let us also be clear today that the faith community did not ask for this bill, and the faith community does not want this bill. We of faith certainly have our differences. We worship on different days, we have different sacred texts and different theologies, but we are absolutely united in our belief that what we want our legislators in Georgia to do this year is to work together to address important issues like juvenile justice and education, both of which have already involved successful bipartisan solutions here in Georgia. Rather than attempting to legislate solutions to our conflicts and differences with House Bill 29, we should focus on the efforts of unifying causes, such as the examples I suggested earlier. Friends, let us reason together as our scripture instructs us to do. In so doing, we might find ourselves united across all divides, and together we might address the real problems that face Georgia. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Rabbi Berg. I'd like to introduce now the Reverend William Flippin, Jr. He is pastor of Emmanuel Lutheran Church here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you. It is a delight to be here among my colleagues spanning different denominations and interfaith. But we're here united for a common purpose. Religious freedom is a deeply resident American principle. In fact, it is one of the most fundamental rights as Americans. From the first Puritans who arrived in Massachusetts, because of religious persecution, we are protected in the Constitution on religious freedom and expression. We all know that freedom is a great responsibility to protect, to uplift, to enlighten, but also it is the responsibility of freedom that can harm others. That's why I stand today opposing House Bill 29. As a Lutheran pastor of the Evangelical Lutheran Church in America, sharing with these great faith leaders that universal values, ethics of the way we treat others should reflect the way we want to be treated based on the universal love of our Creator. Laws that are created or interpreted that go against that principle in harming any group goes against that principle hurt us all. As people of faith, we must fill our frames with not only the 10 Commandments, but with the great commandment that Jesus gave all of us, as well as all the virtues of a spirit-filled life. It's true that the commandments contain a list of rather daunting thou shalt nots, but these 10 rulings are not meant to drag us down into negativity. In fact, they are intended to give us a very positive framework for the living of our lives. The first 4 commandments provide us with guidance for our relationship with God, and the last 6 explains what it means to have a healthy relationship with each other. We are standing for the principles of the Constitution of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness, which the First Amendment protects. But we believe that our love of neighbor is the framework of justice that guides my standing today. You can think of the 10 Commandments as being 2 pictures instead of one. After all, God used 2 tablets of stone to deliver the commandments of Moses. The worship of God's majesty, that's picture 1. And love of one another, that's picture 2. They are equally beautiful, equally innovative, equally well-crafted. No doubt Jesus had this 2-frame approach in mind when he said that the greatest commandment called us both to love the Lord your God and to love your neighbor as yourself. As an ELCEA pastor, I first understood this in making a volatile stand in support of the sexuality statement in my first call in the Deep South in Columbus, Georgia, supporting clergy in committed same-sex partnership. Clearly, these commandments are designed to help us, not to hurt us. That's why we need to tap in a source of energy and security when we worship God rather than the powers of the world. The very same can be said for the second frame of the Ten Commandments. Despite the repeated thou shalt nots that it contains, there's an enormous amount of guidance and direction to be gained from the six final commandments. Despite our natural tendency to rebel against any limitations on our human freedom, when we collide, which I believe House Bill 29 is doing, with the commandments, we're going to get hurt, period. We'll be hanging in public view as a frame without a message, a canvas without a painting. It's as though we ripped out the frame, the very meaning of life, the very reason for which God has placed us on earth. We're an empty frame when our lifestyle trumpets the values of consumerism and materialism. We sacrifice our well-being for the sake of material possessions. We present our own interests as being identical to God's interests and attempt to legitimize our ideologies and positions by attaching them to the name of God. We fail to honor and respect our elders. We carry hatred and resentments in our heart against others. We read the New Testament and come across the great commandment of Jesus to love God and love neighbor. It is important to see the two tablets of the Ten Commandments and to post them prominently in your heart and mind. On one tablet, you have the first four commandments concerning your relationship with God. And on the other, you have the last six commandments concerning your relationship with neighbor. The Georgia Discriminatory Religious Freedom Restoration Act infringes and violates the core of human ethics and our relationship with our neighbor. On one side is God, on the other side is neighbor. Both are important, both are God's will, both are found throughout the Bible. Old Testament and New, both are close to the heart of Jesus. Let us join together with these very important sides, shaping my experience as a Lutheran clergyman, and know that what Dr. Martin Luther King said, we are all tied together in a single garment of destiny and an inescapable network of mutuality. Thank you.
Thank you, Reverend Flippin. Final clergy colleague I'd like to introduce is the Reverend James Lampkin. He is the pastor at the Northside Drive Baptist Church here in Atlanta, Georgia.
Thank you, and it's an honor to be invited to stand here along with my very articulate colleagues, and I appreciate their ministry. We Baptists are known to be long-winded, but I'm an oddball kind of Baptist, and so this is going to be brief. I am James Lampkin, pastor of Northside Drive Baptist Church in Atlanta. I am for religious freedom, and I am for religious responsibility. Because of both of these, I must say that I am not for this legislation. Here are three reasons why. First, I think it is unnecessary. I believe the First Amendment is enough, and it is working. And though this Georgia legislation may come with good intention, I think it could make this issue of religious freedom and responsibility more complicated and have unintended consequences. Second, I think there's a need to dialogue and communicate before trying to legislate. I suggest an extended time of consultation with folk of all faiths, especially minority faiths in Georgia, such as Jews, Sikhs, Muslims, and others, and ask them what they need. And then we of majority faiths would respond as well. Third, though modeled after the Federal Religious Freedom Restoration Act of 1993, this is not 1993. I helped with RFRA in 1993. I lived in the D.C. area. It emerged out of a broad coalition of faith groups, and it emerged out of a certain context. But times have changed, and polarization has set in. These are anxious times that require patient religious responsibility that seeks to understand and work for the common good of all people. I believe we can do this because we already stand on the common ground of religious freedom. Thank you.
I'd now like to introduce to you and acknowledge Senator Nan Orrock, who has been our host this morning, and invite her to make a few remarks as well.
Thank you very much. We appreciate the broad interest in this legislation that's now attempting to work its way through the legislature for a second year. I want to thank and acknowledge the wisdom and the perspective that we've heard shared this morning by leading members from the faith community here in Georgia. This voice is important. I'm happy to have been able to bring them to the Capitol to share this perspective and to voice my concern that we not see this unnecessary, unneeded, polarizing legislation which does nothing to advance the welfare of Georgians, the economy of our state, meeting the needs that have been expressed and the challenges we face in this session. Do not let House Bill 29 become a chit to garner some votes to pass important, significant legislation. That is my caution to my colleagues and to the leadership here under the Gold Dome. We must be very clear that legislation like this is divisive. The business community is highly concerned. The faith community is highly concerned. It's a small group of people who are attempting to drive this through in our state and in other states. And it doesn't reflect an agenda that serves Georgia. It's certainly, in the opinion of countless commentators, colleagues of mine, people across this nation who are concerned about this effort, it can become just a cover for anti-gay discrimination or discrimination against whomever one wishes to discriminate against. And the community here in Atlanta that I represent, broad voices from a broad faith community across this state, the business community, and I believe any concerned political leader who wants to see our state move forward stands in opposition to this. I'm so appreciative of the leadership and the perspective that we've heard shared here. The wisdom is on my right and my left, and I welcome you to bring your inquiries as we discuss this and approach a session where we have important major challenges. Let's come together, not come apart over House Bill 29. Are there questions?
Yes, I have several. For the two of you that worked on the bill back in 1993, maybe this is a question for you all. Reverend, you said that this is not needed, that the First Amendment protects our rights. But then why was it needed in 1993? Why did you fight to have it passed in 1993? Like, what's the difference?
Part of the genesis of the RFRA in '93 was out of the Native American community and their right to worship as they felt led by the Creator. And because Native American and the federal government were so, just blended together, that this was an important context that gave rise to that. Once it got named by the Baptist Joint Committee for Religious Liberty as a conciliatory group that pulled together all the way from James Dobson to the ACLU, all these different groups found this to be a common ground that they wanted to stand on. And so out of that context and because of that need, that we all just felt it was a good time to take that stand. But a lot's changed, 9/11, and the pluralism and the polarization has changed since then.
Do you think the federal law needs to be repealed then?
I would say, my opinion is to leave the federal law alone, but not add to it.
I spoke with Senator Josh McCune, who's considering, introducing his own bill. He said if he's going to mirror the same federal wording, then why would you be opposed? Because he says, and there's a lot of, there's two sides here that I don't think will ever come together on this, because he says that state prisoners don't have the protections that federal prisoners do in Georgia.
I can't speak to the specifics of that. From what I have seen, it's not a mirror. It's additional wording. I don't know exactly what the senator is proposing, but there's a lot more wording than the more precise wording of the federal RFRA. And maybe my colleagues would know more about that.
He introduces the same wording, but just, puts the state in there, would you all be okay with that? Since you're all okay with it in 1993, maybe the rabbi wants to weigh in?
My challenge with changing it now, I think it's very similar, is that a lot has changed in the world since 1993, and I think what Senator Orrock said, that the bill is being introduced now as an opportunity to publicly, in the name of religion, discriminate against different groups, and for that reason, I would neither alter the federal bill nor would I add an additional state measure.
Is there a national group that's pushing this? Is a national organization that's pushing this agenda?
Let me just.
There are similar, there have been similar
There-
pieces of
Whenever you
legislation.
see legislation cropping up in state after state like this, it's an effort to create an impression that there's a public demand for this bill, which is false. And it no doubt has some coordination and some collaboration. I don't have the name of an organization to bring to you today that's doing this across the country, but it's certainly a popular bill in some quarters of the political spectrum.
Senator, what the protesters later this afternoon are going to say is that the demand is real, and that the perfect example of that is Chief Cochran over at the city of Atlanta. What's your reaction to that? I mean, he's become a bit of a lightning rod with religious freedom advocates. Do you feel like this momentum now with this high-profile case is going to make it more difficult on your end to stop the bill?
This effort in this bill is wrong-headed. There's no doubt in my mind that there will be efforts to fan the flames of a personnel matter in the city of Atlanta, where an appointed member of the administration of the mayor did not comply with requests to him by the mayor who employed him. And there will be every effort made to cloud this discussion with that incident. But that's a personnel incident, and that is a public servant who has people working under him and who issued opinions and then did not honor the request of his employer.
Sounds like you think it's a distraction that Chief Cochran, would you?
I absolutely think that it's, we've seen it over and over again where you create a firestorm in order to push a policy. And a lot of mythology is promoted. You create false martyrs. We've seen all of that, and again, I'm quite comfortable with the mayor's action and with the mayor's ability to run the city and make personnel decisions.
Rabbi, could we, clergy to
And that's right. Let me step aside because this is a day when we're hearing from representatives of the faith
Rabbi, would
community.
you like to comment on that as well? Or,
I would say the exact same.
Could you speak, get on the microphone?
I would say the same thing, that is a specific personnel matter. That was a decision made by the mayor who makes personnel decisions about the staff that he hires, and that issue is going to be raised up as a false example, and I frankly don't think one has anything to do with the other, and I want to make sure that singular issue of an individual personnel decision is not used to change the policy of the state of Georgia that does not need to be changed.
Why do you think so many religious leaders have jumped on that bandwagon then? If it is two separate issues, why have so many people?
I don't think that so many religious leaders have. I think that if you took a poll of religious leaders about this Religious Freedom House Bill 29, they would, for the most part, be lined up here with us. And as I said in my remarks earlier, nobody asked the faith community if we wanted this bill, and I find myself standing at this podium in this room far too often about a bill that dramatically affects the religious community that nobody asked the rabbis, the priests, the imams, and the ministers if we wanted. Nobody asked us about a religious freedom bill.
So what I hear you saying then is that some religious leaders are using the situation with the chief as a lightning rod.
I believe that some politicians, some religious leaders are certainly using that as a lightning rod, but we are here to say unequivocally that that should not be used as one singular personnel matter should not be used as an example of why the law in Georgia needs to be changed.
One more question. This is unconstitutional at all? Would it stand the test of, obviously 93 has had a chance to be questioned in the Supreme Court. Would this bill cause a problem there or not?
I don't think any of us are constitutional lawyers and prepared to answer that. What we do understand is that in states where this kinds of legislation has been proposed, it opens up all kinds of potentialities for very expensive litigation. So any individual can make this petition around religious freedom being violated, and so there is the incredible potential for very expensive lawsuits, not only at the state level, but across the state in local municipalities.
Do you have any examples of that?
I'm not prepared to offer an example, but there's been plenty in states where this has been proposed, conversation and attorneys raising this concern.
What about examples of actual discrimination? Have we seen that with these laws in the states or the federal law? Have we seen examples where people have been discriminated against?
There is a history, and again, folks who know more of the history and it's out there in the public domain, there have been suits filed, and many of them have been found to be illegitimate. So we won't comment any more on that because we're not attorneys prepared to speak on those matters. But the legal community across the board has raised significant concerns about the potential for very expensive litigation.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
Thank you all very much for coming today.
You don't have an example.